Hi, everyone, and welcome to Legal Management Talk. I'm your host, Justin Eskenazi. So today, our guest is Alex Tring, and he is the Director of Operations Resource Management at BigHand. And first of all, thanks for being here. Really happy to have you and to get to, go forward with this conversation.
Brilliant. Thank you so much. Delighted to have the opportunity to be a part of this and to have the chance to talk on this subject. So really grateful for the invitation. Thank you.
Yeah, and so usually I'll do an intro to the topic, but this time I want you to kind of introduce it because BigHand recently came out with their 2025 resource management report, and that's titled The Million Dollar Problem. So, I guess the first obvious question is, what is the million dollar problem?
So when we talk about resource management and legal resource management in this context, we're looking at how you manage the allocation of work to your lawyers and your attorneys. So that's a big part of it, work allocation. And then there are a wider elements of how you're managing the careers of fee earners within the firm, how you're getting them access to the right kind of work that supports them, and then also how you are able to operate more profitably as a practice area and as a firm as a whole through making sure that you've got the right people doing the right work at the right time, and you're able to think about that in a really strategic way. The million dollar problem, as we have titled our report, relates both to that, the management of how you're delivering your work for your clients in a profitable way. But something we've really noticed in the last year or two is the relationship with attrition and the cost to a firm of losing key talent. And that's something that we've seen in our report is on the increase. So I think there was a figure, several figures within the report that show attrition increasing across the different levels within a firm. So right up and including partner. And there's a serious amount of cash associated with losing talent. So both the cost of going out to market and finding replacement, you then have to consider the time that somebody is ramping down, the time that you're without that individual, and then the time that it takes to get somebody up to speed. You also have to consider if one person goes, they may be taking other members of the team that they work with them, and they may also be taking client relationships with them. So making sure that you're retaining that talent is a really key thing for firms to be focused on. Resource management and work allocation has a really key role in helping to achieve that.
Yeah. So I know this isn't necessarily a new problem, but it's
Sure.
kind of a trend that started back even before the pandemic and has now probably kind of accelerated because of the pandemic. So what are kind of the trends that you've been seeing, as this problem continues to grow?
Yeah. So, I mean, resource management's not a new topic. For as long as you've had fee earners and a billable hour, you've had resource management because there has to be a way to allocate that work to certain individuals. In the last 5 to 10 years, there's been a real focus and light shining on it, and a lot of firms in both in the UK market and the North American market have taken steps to really think about how they're managing that. And as you say, that has accelerated and changed off the back of the pandemic as well, due to sort of a bit of a cultural shift in how we're all working or how we'd all like to be working. So there's more interest in your working arrangements where you're able to do your work. There's a focus on work-life balance and the opportunity to consider well-being, and those elements coming into people's decision making around their careers as well. And I think traditionally there's sort of been a path where you come into a law firm as an associate, you do your time, and you're on your route to partnership, and that was the option. I think there are a lot more options for those individuals in legal to take their careers now. So there's more interest in the career experience right through their careers and the opportunities that lie before them. So rather than just paying the highest salary to keep the talent until they reach their partnership level, it's more about what else can the firm offer to deal with a change in working interests and working style.
Yeah, and that goes hand in hand with the kind of attrition aspect, as people they decide that this way of working isn't doing it for me. So now I feel like I need to make a change, and that's either switching law firms or am I right that there's a lot of lawyers who are now either going in-house or leaving the industry entirely?
That's certainly the case. Yeah, I think it's been a traditional route for some in the profession to go in-house, and we're certainly still seeing that. And the clients of law firms want that as well. They want that talent to bring into their firms. But added to that is, yes, there's an increasing number of individuals who actually leave the industry altogether and take their experience in other directions. And that's something that came out in our report as well, that actually for those leaving law firms, the number saying that they are leaving the profession has doubled in the last 12 months. So in 2024, it was 9% of leavers, and the most recent stat for 25 is 16% of leavers saying that they're going into other industries.
Yeah.
So yeah, that's another dynamic that firms have got to cope with. It's not just about keeping the talent against your competitor, but actually against the other opportunities that are open to high performing individuals who are of real interest in different markets.
Yeah, and the consequences of losing an attorney, especially a partner, but even an associate, are pretty significant, because you're not only losing that person, but you're potentially losing their clients. You're potentially losing their entire team if they're lots of laterals are bringing their whole team with them. So back up that point about the $1 million problem. That's a huge loss for any firm.
Absolutely. Yeah. And it's clear, and we've developed calculators as well where you can put in some information around your own law firm, and it can show you the impact of attrition even down to a single individual exiting. So that's a real consideration, but there's also impacts, as you mentioned, on your client base. So they may be wandering off with those individuals, but also on the culture of the firm. So if individuals see high performers leaving and going somewhere else, they're going to ask questions why that might be, and is the grass greener? Is that purely to do with salary, or are there other elements at play? And those other elements are some of the things we're able to explore with resource management.
Right. And since you mentioned the client aspect, I want to touch on that before we dive deeper into the resource management part, because there's a number in the report that I think is pretty staggering, which is that 97% of the firms surveyed reported losing a client in the last 12 months, often multiple clients. And considering so many firms, it's probably not a shock to the people listening to this podcast. But, at least for me, that's a huge like I said, staggering kind of number. And so I guess my question for you is two questions really are: how do you stem in this current environment? How do you stem that level of client attrition? I don't know if prevent is the right word, because if the client wants to leave, then they want to leave. But how do you try to head that off? And then for the clients that are sticking with you, how do you make their experience better so that they don't then decide to leave your firm?
Yeah, it's a really interesting point, and I'm really pleased that we made it part of the report as well, because it gives a good backdrop of the market and the context of where this discussion lies. Yeah, so that 97% figure, an increase in client attrition over the last 12 months. And you can put that next to another stat in the report, which makes it even more interesting, which is an increase in client demand. And we had 86% of respondents tell us that they were getting increased demand from their clients. So it's not because the work isn't there. The work is certainly there. So it's about why is that relationship not being sustained within the firm, and it's because it's competitive. It's a really competitive market out there. and firms are doing their best to win new business as well as retain the clients that they do have. I would say some of the things that we've really noticed in the last few years is an increased interest from a client in how a firm is operating. So a lot of that comes down to cost. So clients are really interested in costs, and they want to see firms addressing that challenge. They're also interested in how people are being managed and who is doing their work for them. And they also want to partner with firms who share their interests and their ambitions in areas such as well-being, which is a big focus that everyone's interested in. So the law firms that are being successful in maintaining their relationships and winning new relationships are the ones that are able to provide that visibility and that transparency to their clients around how they're working, who's doing the work, and that they are able to operate in a way that sort of meets the interest of the client and partners with the client. And I've certainly heard from panel discussions that I've been involved in and so on that's what clients of firms want. They want a partner who they can work with on a long-term strategy. So for us, resource management allows us to provide a lot of that transparency. So we know who's doing the work. We know how we can get access to those individuals at the right time. We know that we're using appropriate level resource with the right skills to do the different parts of the work that's involved. And we can show that to the client through data and through the stories that the members of the firm's team are conveying to the client as well. So yeah, it's a real area of interest for me to be part of those discussions and see some of the elements that are at play in this topic. And yeah, it's been delightful to be able to help some of the firms that we've worked with to, be able to show their clients how they can work with them in the best way possible, and that's leading to that opportunity to retain them and grow them.
Right. And so, on that transparency, that then ties into the whole resource management and how firms go about assigning work to people. And in the report, it highlights how a lot of work is allocated just based on a lawyer's preference and who they think is, who they want to do the job, who they think is going to do the best job. And, a relatively low percentage of firms are using data to be able to definitively say, this piece of work should go to this person and this piece of work should go to that person. And so why is that, and how do you kind of wrap your brain around using the data instead of the personal preferences?
Yeah. I mean, it's with everything to do with who's involved in a piece of work is something that needs to be balanced, and we want to bring as many data points and factors into the decision-making process as possible. And we do need to be sensitive to relationships and who's good at working together, because that's an element here. But yeah, there are staggering stats that come out of the report. So close to 40% of respondents saying that the majority of allocation decisions are based on partner preference as opposed to merit. It was the way that it was worded. So those who deserve to do the work are getting passed over because a partner is choosing to work for it with a certain individual for reasons unknown. So that's something that we really need to consider. We have the chance with the technology that we've looked to put in place and the kind of work that we're doing with clients to look at skill sets and experience and how we can track those and understand those. So who's got what experience and to what level, but also building into that their own preferences and development needs. So somebody who's done the work before might not always be the right person to do the work again. So we actually need to think about, yes, they've got that experience, but they need to be getting experience in new areas. And we've got this other individual who is really keen to get involved in that type of work or has been tasked to get involved in that kind of work. And therefore we want the forum to be able to bring that into the decision making, put that alongside real visibility of actual capacity. So not just looking at last week's utilization number, but having real plans in place around how people are planning to spend their time, where that capacity lies and where the flexibility lies as well. So somebody might be really, really busy, but actually the work that they were doing, if we can see what work that they're doing, we might be able to see how we can move that around, how we can prioritize and so on. So it makes it a lot more fluid. It gives you the opportunity to be strategic in how you're managing your key commodity, which is people's time, and developing that talent at the same time. So it's supporting how you're delivering to the client, it's supporting operating profitably, and it's really playing into that attrition point because you're giving your lawyers access to the work that they need to be getting access to. As I say, though, all a balance. We bring those things into a decision-making process, but that decision-making process still needs to happen. And it's right that partners have a key role in that, but it's got to be objective.
Right. And, as you're mentioning that attrition point, going back to the client attrition aspect, maybe tell me if I'm being way off base here, but maybe a silver lining of this kind of reshuffling of clients is that it then allows you to be able to focus more on prioritization and knowing, exactly who is best at doing what, instead of everybody getting spread too thin and you're kind of just trying to keep your head above water, so to speak.
Yeah. I mean, there's lots of things that to drive that opportunity to think differently. I think some of the experience that we've seen with firms is you'll often find that even within a particular practice area, there'll be some individuals who are really busy, while there are others who are struggling to get access to work to meet the expectations that are put on them. So thinking about actually how you can distribute that work in a more strategic way, in a fairer way, in a more profitable way, has an immediate return on investment, both day to day in terms of what you're able to bill, but then again, how you're developing that talent, how you're making that talent more valuable by giving them that breadth of experience when they're more junior, that chance to specialize as they become more senior, and developing those individuals into a valuable commodity that wants to be loyal and stay with the firm. It works differently in different types of practice area as well when you're looking at work allocation. So there are some where it's quite transactional and you're looking day to day, what work is coming through and how do we distribute that to this person or that person who's got a bit of capacity. You'll have other areas where it's a bit more portfolio planning. So what are the client teams that each individual needs to be attached to? How do we structure those client teams? Have we got the right leverage of junior support within those teams? Have we got the right number of client teams per person to give them the opportunity to maintain a consistent level of utilization? All of that strategic thinking is part of what resource management is able to offer.
Mm-hmm. And I know this also ties to a point we talk about a lot because it is so important, succession planning and work allocation is obviously a huge part of that because you want people who are coming up to be doing the appropriate work that will allow them to succeed should anything happen to the people above them, or if there's an upcoming retirement or anything like that, and then they'll be ready to hit the ground running as soon as that occurs.
Yeah, I think there's two elements to that. So firstly, it's about understanding your risk. So who are the key individuals in particular specialisms or area of expertise? If they were to exit the firm, are they taking that capability with them? And does that hinder the firm in what it's able to offer to clients? And does that then lead to that client attrition issue that we talked about? So by being able to track those skills, have an inventory of the experience that your individuals have, you're able to spot those risks. You're also able to spot the opportunities. So are there particular individuals who have closely related skills to an area that's really flying at the moment? And actually those are people that you could look to leverage who might not have been top of mind without that understanding and without that data at hand. So yeah, that succession planning part is really key. The other element to that as well is again how you operate profitably. if you've got a particular area of specialism where everybody's getting more and more senior and you're not leveraging the team and bringing the juniors in and spreading that knowledge, then it's going to become more expensive for you as a firm to deliver that work. So again, it's a really important area when you're thinking about succession planning. That then also feeds into headcount planning. So when a request for a hire comes through from one area of a team, actually, does the utilization levels and the skill sets in the broader team support the need to go out and make that hire, or are there other opportunities? So when you're looking at promotions, what's the impact going to be? All of those different things, if you've got that data and you've got the right knowledge to support the use of that data in those teams, then there's so much opportunity to have a really big impact, both from a people perspective and on the bottom line from a profitability perspective.
Yeah. And so when we're talking about data, what are some of the specific data points that you should be looking for if you're trying to use the data to better optimize your work allocation? What should you exactly be looking for?
So in the system that we've developed and where we've worked with firms to do this across things like BI tools, the key areas for us are to look at the skills information and to look at the capacity information and put that alongside some of the more traditional metrics that are used in allocation decision making. So obviously you need to know who the people are, what their level is, what their locations are, the jurisdictions they can operate, what their billing rate is, all of that information, which I'm sure exists within easy reach. But then adding to that data around the experience. So we would work with a firm to look at all the different practice areas and then map out the skills that you would expect to find within those different areas, and then put processes in place to start to track who's got what experience and to what level, who's got development needs. And then there's a real opportunity to bring that into the decision-making process, both when you need to be able to search that to find somebody for a particular need, and also to when you want to be proactive and you can look at an individual and think about, right, what do I need to get that person involved in? And then it's about that forward view of commitment. So what are people working on? How much of their time is committed to different types of work, to different clients, and where is the flexibility within that? And those two are the key elements that firms traditionally don't have, or have in slightly different ways in different areas. There's a lack of consistency in that data across the firm, and that makes it difficult to use. So that's been our real focus, alongside several other areas that I could talk about all day long. But I won't.
One last thing I want to touch on is, and it's mentioned also in the report, that in order to kind of focus on gathering this data and using the technology in the most effective way, a lot of firms are using resource managers, and so they have a dedicated person to doing this. And while a lot of firms have the resources to that, a lot of firms also don't, and aren't able to spend those man hours on just solely that one purpose. So for the smaller and mid-sized firms who maybe have fewer resources, what can they do to kind of get that same effect without needing that actual person there doing that job?
Yeah, so you're right. The rise of the legal resource manager is definitely something that we've seen over recent years, and that's a role that's been very well established in other professional services environments for many years. It is something that the larger firms in particular have started to adopt, and we see whole resource management functions with a director of resource management or a head of resource management within the firm, and then resource managers working with different areas. And that's been really successful when they've got access to the right data to support the role that they're doing. But what I would say is there is an opportunity to see significant impact from small adjustments when it comes to how you're allocating work. The objectivity in the process is valuable, and that's one of the key bits of value that a resource manager can add. But actually, that can be somebody who has that as part of a broader remit. So particularly in North America, we've seen practice managers have resource management as part of their role. So there are individuals who you can sort of leverage, who already exist within the teams, and the firm to be able to have an impact when they've got access to the right data. But we've also worked with clients, particularly mid-tier clients, where partners are using our system directly. So it's not a huge amount of change to cope with. It's about finding the right tools and the right data to support existing processes. And we've seen some really good successes with that as well, where actually it saves a lot of time from a partner's perspective. And that's a real return on investment when you make improvements in resource management, because that time, partner time, as we know, extremely valuable. And we want to be able to see that being put to better use. And the access to the data is something that allows them to see who they should be targeting, who they should be talking to very quickly, and being able to see that skill set and that experience and know who they can reach out to directly to get involved in their work, as opposed to ringing all around the houses, walking the floor, going into several different offices. Who do you know? What's your experience in this area? Who should I go and speak to? And it can take hours and hours of work to identify who it is that you need to speak to. So actually just having that data at the hands of partners is really valuable in itself.
Yeah, for sure. Well, again, I really appreciate you being here. It always fascinates me how, the topic of retention is so broad, and there's so many aspects that go into it, from, the workplace experience and benefits and most certainly this whole work allocation thing, because if if the attorneys aren't doing the job that they are best at doing, then they're not going to want to stick around. So I appreciate you being here and walking through this really key part of a big, very important discussion.
Thank you so much. I love talking about this stuff, so thank you for giving me an audience.
Of course, no problem. And speaking of audience, thank you to our viewers and listeners and subscribers for tuning in. Please be sure to subscribe to our YouTube channel, like this video, comment, and you can always find us wherever you get your podcasts. And as always, you can learn more about ALA at alanet.org. Until next time.